Our next impacted witness will be introduced by Dr. Jim Beard. Following that, he will be questioned by Commissioner and Judge Lou Trosh, and then affirmed by Commissioner Beard as well. I turn it over to you, Commissioner Beard.
Hello. I have this pleasure of introducing Arkevious Armstrong. He was born in Gastonia, North Carolina. His life experiences from foster care, detention centers, being a high school dropout with many run-ins with the law, eventually landed him in prison on 2 separate occasions. Since being released in 2006, Arkevious has devoted his time with mentoring, community outreach, and eventually starting his own program, Step Up to Leadership, a mentoring program for boys. He is also the founder of Arkinspire and is a motivational speaker, author, and life coach. We look forward to hearing from him.
Hey, I want to first and foremost say thank you so much, Mr. James Beard, and all the rest of the amazing people who shared their story. But, you know, being able to have the opportunity to be on a platform to share not just my story, but to show people that, you know, there are a lot of people that suffer from the injustice and the, you know, labeling in the justice system. So I want to just pretty much pinpoint and highlight something that I feel like what we really overlook, and that's being born and birth with the label. And I want to first just start off by saying in 1981, a young lady by the age of 24 gave birth early to her 5th child, which was a boy. And of course, I got to be talking about myself. You know, this 24-year-old woman who gave birth early to a young man who was already struggling with stability, that was already struggling with 5 kids, was already struggling with her addiction. She had no hope. She had no direction. She had no help. So at this point in time, I can say that I was birthed with the label. I was birthed with the target to not only understand the struggle, but to understand that this young kid will have a long road ahead of him. And so I want to just highlight a few things that I feel like what I went through as a young kid, from foster care to group homes, to detention centers, to training school, to state prison, to federal prison. I do apologize for that. I'm trying to make sure I keep up with my own personal time. But I recall at an early age watching my mom go in and out of the crack houses. She kept me at her hip. By this time, all of my other siblings was already dispersed, living with relatives, living with friends, so on and so forth. And by the age of 6, I was taken out the house and put in foster care. Me and my 2 other siblings, which was my baby sister and my oldest sister. And at that point, I was placed in foster care with a white family. And I was hurt. I was afraid. I was lost. Not only afraid and lost of the fact that I'm sitting here with individuals who I had no clue who they were and why I was there, but I was hurt and lost and confused because the little boy was taken away from his mother. The fact of the matter that this woman had a drug addiction and she had her own struggles and she was battling her own demons. She didn't know how to not only just take care of her kids, but she didn't have the resources and help to help her get off the drugs that she was struggling with. So fast forwarding this story, because it's very long and lengthy, I started using drugs by the age of 12. I started getting in and out of trouble, from petty larceny to leaving home, running away, suspensions, fights in schools, to where I started hanging around older adults, started selling drugs and carrying firearms by the age of 12 and 13. By the age of 13, I was facing 24 years to life for attempted murder charge that I did commit. They kept me as a juvenile, but if they would have bound me over to adult court, I would have been facing those 24 years to life. I got out at 17 years old, went right back to the same environment, around the same people, with no structure, no guidance, no plan, no resources. So I started back doing the same thing that I left off the first time doing: robbing, carrying guns, using drugs, but now it was 10 times worse than it was before. By the age of 17, getting out, I had already had my run-ins with the law from carrying firearms, resisting arrest, driving without license, false ID, so on and so forth. So I've already understood at this point in time, at the age of 17, 18, I'm going into this thing in the wrong direction. By the age of 19, I was facing another 35 years to life for another attempted murder charge. I was sentenced to 10 years for signing a plea. Now, the point of the story that I'm trying to make here is this, is that even though, in whatever the case may be, there are so many other young kids that are labeled at birth. And so already having issues throughout school, elementary, already going through the system, government system, mom on Section 8, housing authority, so on and so forth. We know the story, but they are already labeled at birth. So this is how I felt like that I didn't get a fair shot when I had my encounters with the law as well as the judge, because they was ready to throw the book away and throw the book at me and put me through the system and get rid of me. But I realized something as I got older. I never had a fair shot, not only at birth, but even when I was having my issues in my incidents, I never had the right resources. I never had the right support, nor I never had the right guidance. And so what I feel like the justice system back then, as well as it is today, play a huge part. They don't have the right resources. And I think it goes back to what Ms. Puckett was saying, transparency, and those who have the experience that can not only give the resources, but the guidance to a lot of these young individuals that's going in and out the court system, as well as the resources and the resources and the guidance to a lot of the parents who are also struggling with whatever issues they're struggling with. But again, I just wanted to share that brief testimony. Again, I don't want to go over, so I want to just say thank you for the opportunity. Thank you for this chance to tell my story. And again, I turn it back over to you, Mr. Beard.
Mr. Armstrong, that was powerful testimony. I've just got a couple questions for you. You answered this, I think, as to when racial injustice started to impact you from birth, but when did you realize that many of your experiences resulted from racial injustice? And secondly, as part of that question, what was the biggest impact of this systemic racial injustice, and does it continue to affect your life today?
Well, I feel like I saw where it impacted me from the beginning is where I was actually living in the environment that I lived in. And many officers where I feel like today have a huge influence on how they police certain communities. And the community that I lived in when I was a younger kid was it was drug infested, a lot of crime. So the things that I witnessed and how police used to come to police that community when certain situations happen, it was always at a high level of intensity. And so I can recall again where I had shotguns put the back of my head. I was threatening if I made another move that I'd get my head blown off, so on and so forth. And to see how things have not changed, and to fast forward now, that's why we see so much of the George Floyds in Minneapolis. We see a lot of the Mike Brown incidents. We see a lot of the Eric Garners in New York. And we look at these things and say, okay, what's the problem? And I feel like the emotional connection is not there. And police not understanding the trauma of a lot of the Black African-American peoples in the communities and how to deal with certain individuals. And I will say this, do I feel like it had affected me today? I can honestly say the way I grew up and what I experienced, it has given me the understanding on how to not only be an asset, but to be a tool with law enforcement on how to deal with African-American males or women, not just males, but African-American people in these certain situations. So being the bridge, being the person who can not only be a asset to law enforcement, but also the community as well.
Thank you. I have one more question. If you would just, I'm going to ask you one more question. If you had a magic wand and you could change one thing that would make the most impact in dismantling the system that you just talked about, what would it be?
I would say that if I can wave a magic wand and it would not be, and I'm gonna say this, and I mean, a lot of people may think differently, but I would definitely have to say that I will wave it to hopefully that our people, Black people, wake up and realize it starts with us. And so, and I say that, Mr. Truss, because despite of everything I went through, despite of everything I experienced, you know, the moment I woke up and said, nothing changed till I change, that's when my life changed. And so that's why I spend my days, my months, my years pouring back and giving back and giving the structure and the information to those young individuals to understand that it starts with you. No matter where you come from, no matter what hand you was dealt, you can turn it around. And so again, I told you, my mom was an addict. I was born, I was birthed into it. I was facing 24 years to life. My father committed suicide. He was an addict. My brother was drug dealers. I grew up in the hood. We didn't have running hot water. Everyone in my family dropped out. But here it is. I went back to school. I wrote 3 books. I'm traveling around the world. I own homes. I got a beautiful family, you know, and so I can come from that and still do this. It starts with us, man. That'll be the one I wave.
Thank you, Mr. Armstrong. Well, you've done a lot, and you're now showing people the way. So thank you again for your testimony. I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Beard for some affirming remarks.
Well, I'm certainly overwhelmed and impressed. By the way, Arkevious, thank you very much for the words that you had to say. The biggest thing I got out of it is self-awareness. If half the people I know, or even 90% of the people I know, had any kind of self-awareness like you do, the world would probably be a better place. You have certainly had everything thrown at you, and somehow, by some miracle, you managed to wake up, as you said. I can't relate. You know, you can tell looking at me, I'm an old white guy. It's hard for me to relate to where you grew up and how you grew up, but I will say thank you for your testimony, and I am very much impressed.
Thank you. I appreciate you as well.
Thank you so much. I want to say thank you to Commissioner Dr. Jim Beard. Thank you to Commissioner Judge Lou Trosh, both for your questions and for the sensitivity that you both brought to Mr. Arkevious Armstrong's testimony. And thank you, Arkevious, for your brilliance, for your willingness to share, for your frankness in telling the honesty of your story, and for what you said, that we've got a role to play in our own redemption here. I'm grateful to hear that.